The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room Jack Morris had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so high above that he could barely see it through the floating lights. Representatives from hundreds of different worlds sat in curved rows that circled the central platform. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Jack had trouble figuring out which end was the head. Jack stood with the other human delegates near the back. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 6 months ago, and humans were still the newcomers. Most of the older species treated them like children who had wandered into an adult conversation. Jack didn't mind much. He was just a lieutenant from the Earth ship Venture, here because his captain needed an extra officer for the delegation. Ambassador Vorath stepped onto the central platform, and the chamber fell silent. The Kryn ambassador was tall, nearly 8 feet, with silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. His face was angular and sharp, and his eyes glowed with a soft purple light. The Kryn Empire controlled over 40 star systems, and had been part of the Council for thousands of years. When a Kryn ambassador spoke, everyone listened. Vorath's voice was deep and carried easily across the massive room. "I come before this council, not as an ambassador, but as a father." He paused, and Jack saw something in the alien's face that he recognized. Pain. The kind that came from loving someone and not knowing how to help them. "My daughter, Princess Lissa, is of age to be bonded. In our culture, this union is necessary to maintain our family's position and to secure alliances that benefit our empire." Vorath's hands clenched at his sides. "But my daughter has a condition. She was born with psychic abilities far beyond what is normal for our people. She cannot control them." Jack leaned toward Commander Stevens, the head of the human delegation. "What does that mean?" he whispered. Stevens kept his eyes on Vorath. "Kryn have natural psychic abilities, but they're usually weak. Telepathy over short distances, maybe some emotional sensing. Sounds like the princess got something much stronger." Vorath continued, "When my daughter experiences any strong emotion, her psychic energy projects outward. Anyone near her feels what she feels, amplified 100-fold. Fear becomes terror. Sadness becomes crushing despair. Anger becomes rage." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various delegates. "We have tried to find her a suitable match. 43 suitors from 7 different species have attempted to court her. The longest any of them lasted in her presence was 11 minutes. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He tried to imagine what it would be like to be so alone. The psychic feedback has left some of these suitors with permanent trauma. Others simply cannot function when she is near." Vorath's voice cracked slightly. "My daughter is not a monster. She is kind, intelligent, and gentle. But she has been alone for most of her life because no one can withstand being near her." The ambassador's next words came out like a plea. "I am asking if there is anyone in this entire galaxy brave enough, strong enough, to give my daughter a chance at a normal life. Is there no one courageous enough to marry my daughter?" Silence filled the chamber. Jack looked around and saw the same expression on every face. Sympathy, yes, but also fear. No one wanted to volunteer for something that might break their mind. Jack thought about the princess, locked away somewhere because her own emotions hurt everyone around her. He thought about his sister, Katie, who had died 3 years ago in a transport accident. Katie had been sick for years before that, and Jack had spent countless hours sitting with her in the hospital. Everyone else had eventually stopped visiting because it was too hard to see her suffer. But Jack had stayed. His hand went up before he fully realized what he was doing. Commander Stevens grabbed his arm. "Morris, what are you doing?" he hissed. "I'll meet her," Jack said, loud enough for the nearby delegates to hear. Several turned to look at him. Stevens pulled him back down. "You don't know what you're volunteering for. Did you hear what he said? Psychic trauma. Permanent damage. I heard him, Jack said. He stood up again, and this time he raised his hand higher. Ambassador Vorath, I would like to meet your daughter. The chamber erupted in noise. Hundreds of different species, all talking at once, in languages Jack didn't understand. The human delegation surrounded him, all of them talking over each other. This is insane, Stephen said. You're throwing your career away. He's throwing his life away, another delegate added. We barely understand psychic abilities. What if exposure to her leaves you brain dead? Jack kept his hand raised, and his eyes on Ambassador Vorath. The Kryn ambassador was staring at him with an expression Jack couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe. Or hope. Vorath raised one hand, and the chamber fell silent again. You are human, he said, and it wasn't quite a question. Yes, sir. Lieutenant Jack Morris, Earth Vessel Venture. Humans are new to the Council. Your species has been in space for less than a century. Vorath walked closer, descending from the central platform. He was even more imposing up close. Why would you volunteer for this? Jack thought about how to explain. Your daughter didn't choose to be alone. She's spent her whole life isolated because of something she can't control. That's not fair to her. He met Vorath's glowing eyes. Maybe I can't help. Maybe I'll only last 5 minutes in her presence, but at least I can try. She deserves to have someone try. Vorath studied him for a long moment. Jack could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. His fellow humans thought he was crazy. The other species probably thought humans were even more reckless than they'd already believed. Finally, Vorath nodded slowly. Very well, Lieutenant Morris. I will arrange for you to meet Princess Lissa tomorrow. We will take every precaution for your safety, but I cannot guarantee that you will not be harmed. I understand, sir. Do you? Vorath leaned closer. You should know that you are not the first to volunteer out of pity or a desire to appear heroic. Those motivations do not last when faced with the reality of my daughter's condition. I'm not doing this to be a hero. I'm doing it because nobody else will. Something changed in Vorath's expression. The hardness softened just a fraction. Tomorrow, then. May your gods protect you, Lieutenant Morris. As Vorath returned to the central platform to formalize the arrangement, Stevens pulled Jack aside. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Jack watched the ambassador speaking to the council officials. Yeah, he said quietly. I just volunteered to meet someone who's been alone her whole life. Seems like the least I can do. Stevens shook his head, but didn't argue further. Around them, the other delegates were already sending messages back to their home worlds. The human who volunteered to court the psychic princess would be news across the galaxy by morning. Jack barely heard any of it. He was thinking about tomorrow, about meeting someone whose own emotions were a weapon she couldn't control, maybe even scared. But he'd meant what he said. She deserved to have someone try, even if that someone was just a human lieutenant who didn't know any better. The Kryn Embassy Station orbited a small moon on the edge of Council space. Jack had spent the entire shuttle ride trying not to think too hard about what he was about to do. Commander Stevens had insisted on coming along, though he would wait outside. Several Kryn medical personnel were also standing by, just in case Jack's brain decided to stop working properly. You can still back out, Stevens said for the 10th time as they walked through the station's corridors. No one would blame you. Yes, they would, Jack replied, and I'd blame myself. He barely slept last night, reading everything he could find about Kryn's psychic abilities. Most of it wasn't helpful. The files described the princess's condition as unprecedented, beyond anything their scientists had seen before. They stopped in front of a massive reinforced door. 2 Kryn guards stood on either side, both armed. A medical officer stepped forward, holding a small device. This is a neural monitor, she explained, attaching it to Jack's temple. If your brain activity shows dangerous patterns, we will remove you from the chamber immediately. Dangerous patterns? Jack asked. Seizures, hemorrhaging, complete neural shutdown. She said it clinically, like she was listing possible weather conditions. The monitor will alert us before permanent damage occurs. Jack swallowed hard. Great, that's reassuring. Ambassador Vorath appeared from a side corridor. He looked even more tired than he had yesterday, like he hadn't slept either. Lieutenant Morris, are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. Vorath nodded to the guards, and they began opening the door. My daughter is inside. She has agreed to meet you, though she believes this will end the same way all the others have ended. He placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. Prove her wrong, if you can. The door slid open, and Jack stepped inside. The room was large and mostly empty. Soft light came from panels in the ceiling. There were a few pieces of furniture, a table, some chairs. But what struck Jack most was how isolated it all felt. This wasn't a room where people lived. This was a room where someone was kept. Then he saw her. Princess Lissa stood near the far wall, her back to him. She was tall like her father, with the same silver-blue skin. But where Vorath's presence was commanding, hers seemed almost fragile. Her long hair was dark blue, almost black, and it fell past her shoulders. She wore a simple gray dress that looked more like a medical gown than royal clothing. She didn't turn around. You may leave when the pain becomes too much, she said softly. Most last only a few minutes, some less. The moment she spoke, Jack felt it. A wave of emotion crashed into him, like a physical force. Loneliness so deep, it made his chest ache. Resignation that sat in his stomach like a stone. And underneath it all, a tiny spark of hope that hurt worse than everything else because it was so fragile, so ready to be crushed again. Jack's knees wobbled. He grabbed the edge of a nearby chair to steady himself. The neural monitor on his temple beeped once, a warning tone. Lissa finally turned to look at him, and he saw her eyes. They glowed brighter than her father's, a brilliant purple that seemed to pulse with energy. Those eyes widened in surprise when she saw him still standing. You're still here, she whispered, and the surprise in her voice created another wave. This one was different, tinged with disbelief and cautious wonder. It hit Jack like a gust of wind, making him stagger. But he didn't fall. He'd felt overwhelming emotions before. When his sister died, the grief had been so intense he thought it might kill him. When his squad was pinned down during a peacekeeping mission on Titan, the fear had been absolute. He'd learned that emotions, no matter how strong, passed. You just had to breathe through them. Jack took a slow breath and straightened up. Yeah, I'm still here. He managed a small smile. Mind if I sit down, though? It's been a long morning. Lissa stared at him like he'd just performed a magic trick. You should be unconscious by now, or running. Another emotional wave, this one confusion mixed with that dangerous hope. Jack pulled out a chair and sat down carefully. I'm Jack Morris. You can call me Jack. I know who you are. She didn't move from her spot by the wall, maintaining as much distance as possible. Everyone in the galaxy knows by now, the human who volunteered out of pity. Not pity, Jack said. The loneliness radiating from her was making his eyes sting. He blinked it away. I volunteered because what's happening to you isn't fair. Life isn't fair. Her voice was flat. I learned that when I was 6 years old, and my psychic abilities manifested. I've been in isolation chambers ever since. That's a long time to be alone. Lissa's laugh was bitter, and the bitterness washed over Jack like acid. You have no idea. Do you know what it's like to hurt everyone who comes near you? To know that your very presence causes pain? Jack thought about his sister again, about the guilt she'd carried because she thought her illness hurt their family. Yeah, actually, I think I do. That made Lissa pause. She studied him more carefully now, and Jack felt the psychic equivalent of someone examining him from every angle. Your emotions are strange, she said finally. Humans feel things differently than other species. How so? More intense, more chaotic. She took a small step closer, and the emotional pressure increased. Jack felt his heart rate spike, but he kept breathing steadily. Most species have learned to control their emotions over thousands of years of evolution. Humans haven't. You feel everything so strongly. Is that bad? It means you should be even more affected by my abilities. Your emotions should be amplifying mine, creating a feedback loop that renders you unconscious. Another step closer. But you're still sitting there, talking to me like this is a normal conversation. Jack shrugged. Maybe humans are just stubborn. We've been told we're not ready for space travel, not ready for the council, not ready for a lot of things. We do them anyway. For the first time, he saw something that might have been a smile touch her lips. Stubborn. Yes, I've heard that about your species. She moved to the other side of the table and sat down across from him. This close, the emotional waves were constant and overwhelming. Loneliness, fear, hope, curiosity, all crashing over him in succession. The monitor on his temple was beeping regularly now, but Jack ignored it. Can I ask you something? You're the only person who can tolerate being in the same room with me. You can ask me anything. What do you do all day, when you're alone? The question seemed to surprise her. I study, I read. The Kryn have extensive digital libraries. Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly. I've read most of them. Most? That must be millions of books. I had 23 years with nothing else to do. Another wave of loneliness, so strong that Jack had to close his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Lissa was watching him carefully. You're in pain. It's manageable. You don't have to pretend. Everyone else runs or collapses. You're allowed to do the same. What if I don't want to run? The hope in her flared so brightly that Jack gasped. It was like standing too close to a fire, the heat of it washing over him in waves. But mixed with the hope was fear, the terror of letting herself believe and being disappointed again. Why? She asked, and her voice cracked. Why would you subject yourself to this? Because you asked a question yesterday. You asked if anyone was courageous enough. But I don't think this is about courage. Jack leaned forward, even though it meant the emotional pressure increased. I think it's about seeing someone who needs a friend and deciding to be one. Lissa was quiet for a long moment. The emotions radiating from her shifted, became more complex. Confusion, wonder, fear, and that fragile hope all tangled together. A friend, she repeated softly. If you want one. I don't know how to have friends. I've never had one. Neither do I, really. I'm better at following orders than making conversation, Jack smiled. We can figure it out together. The emotional wave that hit him then was pure surprise, and it was strong enough to make the room spin. The door burst open, and medical personnel rushed in, responding to the neural monitor's alerts. They pulled Jack out of the chair, checking his vital signs, shining lights at his eyes. I'm fine, Jack insisted, trying to push them away. I'm okay. Your neural activity spiked to dangerous levels, one of them said. The session is over. Jack looked past them to where Lissa still sat at the table. Her expression was carefully blank, but he could feel the disappointment radiating from her. Of course it was over. Everything always ended too soon for her. Can I come back tomorrow? Jack asked, loud enough for her to hear. Everyone stopped. The medical personnel looked at each other in confusion. Ambassador Vorath, who had appeared in the doorway, stared at Jack like he'd spoken in an alien language. Lissa stood slowly, her eyes wide. You want to come back? If that's okay with you. The hope that blazed from her was almost blinding, but Jack kept his eyes open. He kept looking at her, letting her see that he meant it. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you can come back. As the medical team led him out for examination, Jack looked back one more time. Lissa was still standing there, one hand pressed against her chest, like she was trying to hold something precious inside. For the first time in 23 years, she wasn't alone. And tomorrow, she wouldn't be alone again. Jack had been meeting with Lissa for 3 weeks now, and each session lasted longer than the one before. What started as 15 minutes had grown to nearly 2 hours. The medical team still monitored him constantly, and he still went back to his quarters with a splitting headache every time. But he kept returning. They talked about everything. Lissa told him about Kryn history and culture, about the books she'd read and the places she'd only seen in pictures. Jack told her about Earth, about growing up in Seattle, about his time in the space fleet. He told her about his sister Katie, about sitting with her in the hospital when everyone else had given up. "That's why you can tolerate my presence," Lissa said one day. They were sitting at their usual table, a little closer than they had been in the beginning. "You've experienced overwhelming grief before. Your mind learned to process intense emotions. Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to know when to quit." Lissa laughed, and the sound made Jack smile. Her laugh created a wave of warmth that spread through his chest like sunlight. He was getting better at recognizing her different emotional signatures, learning to ride them instead of being crushed by them. But not everyone was happy about their growing connection. The opposition started quietly. Small news articles questioning whether a human was suitable for a Kryn princess. Anonymous statements from Kryn nobles suggesting that the match was inappropriate. Commander Stevens called Jack every few days with warnings about political pressure building both on the Council and back on Earth. "There are people who think you're making humanity look weak," Stevens said during one call. "Others think you're trying to gain political advantage through marriage." "I don't care what they think," Jack replied. "This is bigger than just you and the princess now." But Jack didn't care. For the first time in years since Katie died, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. And Lissa, she was changing too. She smiled more. The crushing loneliness that had always radiated from her was fading, replaced by something lighter. Happiness, maybe, or at least the possibility of it. Then Lord Zenthar made his move. Jack had heard about Zenthar before. He was a high-ranking Kryn noble, a military commander who controlled significant political power. He'd been one of the loudest voices opposing Lissa's inclusion in public life. As far as Zenthar was concerned, the princess's condition made her a liability to the Empire. The formal dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Ambassador Vorath had announced that Jack and Lissa's courtship was progressing well, and he wanted to introduce them to some of the more influential Kryn leaders. Jack wore his dress uniform and tried not to feel out of place among aliens who had been navigating galactic politics for thousands of years. Lissa looked beautiful. She wore traditional Kryn formal attire, a flowing dress that shimmered with embedded crystals. But Jack could feel her nervousness. Being around this many people at once was difficult for her. Her psychic abilities affected everyone in the room to some degree, creating a low-level emotional pressure that made several guests uncomfortable. Lord Zenthar arrived late, making an entrance. He was older than Vorath, his silver-blue skin marked with intricate patterns that denoted his military rank. His eyes were sharp and cold as they swept across the room and landed on Jack. "So, this is the human," Zenthar said, his voice carrying across the room. The conversation died down. "The one who thinks he can succeed where 43 others have failed." Jack stood up. "It's an honor to meet you." "Is it?" Zenthar walked closer, studying Jack like he was an interesting insect. "Tell me, Lieutenant Morris, what makes you think you're qualified to join the Kryn royal family? Your species has barely left your own solar system. You know nothing of our culture, our history, our traditions." "You're right," Jack said calmly. I don't know much about Kryn culture, but I'm learning. Princess Lissa has been teaching me. Has she? Xenthar's attention shifted to Lissa, and Jack felt her fear spike. The emotional wave hit everyone in the room, causing several guests to step back. Tell me, Princess, what do you think this human wants from you? Do you truly believe he cares about you, or is he simply seeking political advantage for his primitive species? Lissa's hands were shaking. Jack isn't like that. Isn't he? Humans are known for their ambition, their selfishness. Xenthar's voice grew harder. Your father has been blind to the truth because he's desperate to see you happy. But this match is inappropriate. Dangerous, even. That's enough, Vorath said, stepping forward. You're upsetting my daughter. Am I? Or is she upsetting everyone else? Xenthar gestured to the other guests, many of whom were clearly uncomfortable. Look around, Ambassador. Your daughter's condition affects everyone here. She's a liability to our empire, and binding her to a human only makes it worse. The fear and hurt radiating from Lissa intensified. Jack felt it building like a storm, the psychic pressure increasing with every word Xenthar spoke. The other guests were backing away now, some holding their heads, others looking like they might pass out. You should never have been allowed into public life, Xenthar continued, his words cruel and precise. You're a danger to everyone around you. This human may be able to tolerate your presence now, but how long will that last? Days? Months? Eventually, he'll break like all the others, and you'll be alone again. That was the breaking point. Lissa's control shattered. The psychic storm hit like a physical wave. Guests collapsed, some crying out in pain. The emotions pouring from Lissa were overwhelming. Fear, rage, grief, and self-hatred all mixed together in a crushing wave. Even Vorath staggered, his face contorted in pain. Jack felt it all. The full force of Lissa's anguish slammed into him, trying to drag him down. His vision blurred, his knees went weak. The pain was incredible, like someone was driving needles through his skull. But he'd felt pain before. He'd felt grief that threatened to destroy him. And he'd learned something important. You don't fight overwhelming emotions. You accept them, acknowledge them, and keep moving forward anyway. Jack walked through the chaos. People were on the ground around him, but he kept his eyes on Lissa. She was standing in the center of the room, her hands over her face, her whole body shaking as the psychic energy poured out of her. He reached her and gently touched her shoulder. Lissa, look at me. She dropped her hands, and her glowing eyes were streaming with tears. I can't stop it. I'm hurting everyone. I know. It's okay. Jack moved his hand to her face, wiping away a tear. The psychic storm raged around them, but he focused only on her. Listen to my voice. Feel my emotions, not theirs. Lissa's psychic senses locked onto him, and Jack didn't hide anything. He let her feel his calm, his certainty, his complete lack of fear. He let her feel his care for her, the genuine affection that had been growing over the past 3 weeks. You're not afraid, she whispered. No, I'm not. The psychic pressure eased as Lissa focused on Jack's steady emotional state instead of the panic around them. Her breathing slowed. The glow in her eyes dimmed slightly. Finally, the room was quiet except for the groaning of people slowly getting back to their feet. Jack kept his hand on Lissa's shoulder, grounding her. Lord Xenthar was one of the first to recover. He stood slowly, his face twisted in anger. You see, this is exactly what I was talking about. She's dangerous, unstable. No, Jack said, turning to face him. She was provoked. You deliberately said things you knew would hurt her, trying to make her lose control. I spoke the truth. You spoke cruel words designed to cause pain. Jack's voice was steady but hard. You wanted her to fail, to prove your point that she should be locked away. Well, she didn't fail. She regained control. Because of you, Zenthar sneered. And what happens when you're not here? What happens when you finally realize what you've gotten yourself into, and you leave like everyone else? Jack looked at Lissa, who was watching him with wide, fearful eyes. Then he looked back at Zenthar. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. I say it now, and I'll say it tomorrow, and every day after that. Jack stepped forward, meeting Zenthar's cold gaze. You think humans are weak, because we feel things intensely. But that intensity is also our strength. We don't give up on the people we care about, no matter how hard it gets. Zenthar studied him for a long moment, then looked at Lissa. This isn't over, Princess. The Council will hear about this incident. Let them hear, Vorath said, moving to stand beside his daughter. They'll also hear about how Lord Zenthar deliberately provoked a psychic incident to further his political agenda. Zenthar's expression darkened, but he said nothing else. He turned and left, several other nobles following him. After he was gone, the remaining guests slowly filed out, most casting nervous glances at Lissa. Soon, only Jack, Lissa, and Vorath remained. Vorath looked at Jack with something like wonder. You walked through her psychic storm. I've never seen anyone do that. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, Jack said simply. Lissa grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. Through the physical contact, he felt her emotions more clearly than ever. Gratitude, relief, and something deeper, something that felt a lot like love. Thank you, she whispered. Jack squeezed back. Always. Outside, Zenthar was already planning his next move. But inside that room, for that moment, two people from different worlds stood together and refused to let anyone push them apart. The political fallout from the dinner incident was immediate and intense. Lord Zenthar filed formal complaints with the Galactic Council, arguing that Lissa's psychic abilities made her a public safety threat. Other Kryn nobles joined his cause, demanding that the courtship between Jack and Lissa be ended for the good of the Empire. Ambassador Vorath fought back, but even he had to admit the situation was becoming untenable. Too many powerful people opposed the match, and the incident at the dinner had given them ammunition. Jack sat in Vorath's private office, watching the ambassador pace back and forth. Lissa sat beside him, her hand in his. Over the past weeks, they'd discovered that physical contact helps stabilize her abilities. When Jack touched her, the psychic waves became gentler, more controlled. There may be a solution, Vorath said, finally. The bonding trial. What's that? Jack asked. In ancient times, when a Kryn union was disputed, the couple could request a trial to prove their bond was genuine. 3 challenges designed to test compatibility, trust, and strength. Vorath stopped pacing and looked at them. If you complete the trials, even our harshest critics would have to acknowledge your union as legitimate, according to our oldest laws. Lissa squeezed Jack's hand. And if we fail? Then the courtship ends. Permanently. Vorath's expression was grave. The trials are not easy. They were designed centuries ago for Kryn couples, not mixed-species bonds. No one has attempted them in over 200 years. Jack looked at Lissa. Through their connection, he felt her determination mixed with fear. She wanted this to work as much as he did, but she was terrified of failing. We'll do it, Jack said. Jack, you don't know what you're agreeing to. We'll figure it out. He smiled at her. We've figured out everything else so far, haven't we? Lissa nodded slowly, and through their joined hands, Jack felt her resolve strengthen. We'll do the trials. The first challenge took place on a barren moon that orbited a gas giant. Jack and Lissa stood on the rocky surface, wearing environmental suits, looking at the course ahead of them. It was a maze of canyons and caves, filled with natural hazards and dangerous terrain. You have 12 hours to reach the beacon on the other side, the trial master explained. You must work together. If either of you fails to reach the beacon, the challenge is failed. Jack checked his suit systems, while Lissa extended her psychic senses. I can feel life forms in the caves, she said. Nothing intelligent, but some of them are large. Great. Alien wildlife, my favorite. Jack adjusted his pack. You guide us with your senses. I'll handle any physical obstacles. Sound good? Sounds terrifying. Yeah, but we're doing it anyway. They set off into the canyon system. The first few hours were relatively easy, just difficult terrain and some climbing. Jack's military training helped him navigate the obstacles, and Lissa's psychic awareness kept them away from unstable ground and hidden crevasses. Then they encountered their first real problem. A massive creature, something like a cross between a bear and a scorpion, blocked the only path through a narrow canyon. It was easily 12 feet tall, with armored plating and a tail that ended in a wicked-looking stinger. Can you sense what it's feeling? Jack asked quietly. Lissa focused, and Jack felt her psychic energy extend toward the creature. It's territorial, aggressive, and it sees us as threats. Can we go around? Not without adding 6 hours to our journey. We'd never make it in time. Jack studied the creature, thinking. Then he had an idea. What if instead of fighting it or running from it, we make it not see us as threats? How? You can project emotions, right? What if you project calm? Make it feel safe instead of threatened. Lissa looked uncertain. I've never tried to do that deliberately. Usually I'm just trying to keep my emotions from overwhelming people. But you've been getting better at control, especially when we're together. Jack took her hand. Try. I'll help stabilize you. Lissa took a deep breath and focused. Jack felt the psychic energy building around her, but this time it was different. Instead of her emotions spilling out uncontrollably, she was shaping them, directing them toward the creature. Calm, safety, peace. The massive creature's aggressive posture relaxed slightly, its tail lowered. The psychic suggestion of safety made it less reactive, less threatened by their presence. Keep going, Jack whispered. You're doing it. They moved slowly past the creature, Lissa maintaining the psychic calm the entire time. The creature watched them, but didn't attack. When they reached the other side of the canyon, Jack let out a breath he'd been holding. You did it. You controlled it. Lissa looked at her hands like she'd never seen them before. I've never been able to do that. Direct my abilities instead of just containing them. Maybe you needed someone to practice with. Someone who wouldn't break from the feedback. They made it to the beacon with an hour to spare. The trial master confirmed their success, and they moved on to the second challenge. The second trial was held in a climate-controlled chamber, filled with ancient Kryn puzzles. The trial master explained that they needed to solve a series of problems that required perfect synchronization between partners. These puzzles were designed for Kryn who share a psychic bond. One partner must know what the other is thinking without verbal communication. Jack looked at the first puzzle. It was a three-dimensional maze of light, with pathways that shifted based on simultaneous inputs from two different control panels. How are we supposed to coordinate without talking? Lissa touched his hand. We don't need to talk. You can feel my emotions. Maybe you can feel my thoughts too, if we try. I'm not psychic. No, but we have a connection. I've felt it growing stronger. She moved to one control panel while Jack went to the other. Open your mind. Don't think in words. Just feel. Jack closed his eyes and focused on the sensation of Lissa's presence. It had become so familiar over the past weeks, the constant awareness of her emotions. But now he tried to go deeper, to sense not just what she felt, but what she intended. He felt a pull toward the right. Without thinking, He input the corresponding command. The puzzle's light shifted. Another pull, this time upward. He followed it. They solved the first puzzle in minutes, then the second, then the third. Remarkable, the trial master said. You're adapting to each other at a rate I've never seen. The human brain isn't structured for psychic communication, yet you're forming a rudimentary bond. By the end of the day, they'd completed all 12 puzzles. Jack's head ached from the psychic strain, but he was smiling. 2 down, 1 to go. The third challenge was the one Vorath had warned them about, the deep psychic link. They stood in a meditation chamber, alone. The trial master had explained what would happen. Lissa would lower all her mental barriers, exposing the full depth of her consciousness to Jack. Most beings would be destroyed by the raw intensity of her unfiltered psychic presence. You don't have to do this, Lissa said. If this damages you permanently, I couldn't live with that. Hey, Jack cupped her face at his hands. I trust you, and I want to know all of you, even the parts you've had to hide. It's going to hurt. I know, but pain passes. This is important. Lissa nodded, tears forming in her glowing eyes. Sit with me. They sat facing each other, hands joined. Lissa closed her eyes and began to lower her barriers. The first wave of her consciousness hit Jack like a tsunami. He experienced her entire life in fragments. The fear when her powers first manifested, the horror on her parents' faces, the isolation, the crushing loneliness of years spent alone, the 43 suitors who had failed, the desperate hope every time someone new tried, the heartbreak when they inevitably left. Pain flooded through him, not just emotional, but physical. His neural pathways were burning with psychic energy they weren't designed to handle. He wanted to pull away, to escape the overwhelming intensity. But he didn't. Instead, he opened his own mind as much as he could. Jack showed her his memories, his sister's death, the grief that had nearly destroyed him, the long nights sitting alone wondering if the pain would ever stop. The moment he decided to keep living anyway, to honor Katie by not giving up. He showed Lissa his determination, his stubborn refusal to abandon people he cared about. He showed her the growing affection he felt for her, the way her laugh made him happy, the way her smile felt like sunshine. In that shared psychic space, something remarkable happened. Their consciousnesses didn't just touch, they synchronized. Jack's emotional resilience became an anchor for Lissa's volatile abilities. Her psychic strength flowed through his neural patterns, creating new pathways, new possibilities. When they finally separated, both were shaking and covered in sweat. But something had changed. Jack could feel Lissa's presence in his mind. Not overwhelmingly, but like a gentle warmth. And Lissa, her psychic abilities had stabilized in a way they never had before. What just happened? Jack asked. Lissa touched her chest, wonder in her eyes. We bonded, truly bonded. I can feel you in my mind, anchoring me, and you can feel me. Jack realized she was right. The constant psychic pressure that had always accompanied being near Lissa was gone. Instead, there was a connection, a link that felt as natural as breathing. The trial master entered the chamber and stopped, staring at them. Impossible. You formed a stable psychic bond. Human neural patterns shouldn't be capable of this. Maybe human patterns are more flexible than you thought, Jack said, still holding Lissa's hands. The trial master nodded slowly. You have completed the 3 challenges. Your bond is recognized as legitimate under the oldest Kryn laws. No one can dispute it now. Outside the chamber, Ambassador Vorath was waiting. When he saw them emerge, hands joined, and both smiling despite their exhaustion, he knew what had happened. You did it, he said, and there was pride in his voice. You actually did it. We did it together, Lissa corrected, squeezing Jack's hand. The news spread quickly across the Galactic Council. The human and the Kryn princess had completed the bonding trial, something no one had managed in 2 centuries. Even Lord Zenthar couldn't argue with the results. That night, alone in their quarters, Lissa leaned against Jack's shoulder. "I can feel your emotions so clearly now. Your contentment, your happiness. Is it weird, having me in your head?" "It's the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced." She looked up at him. "For the first time in my life, I'm not alone in my own mind." Jack kissed her forehead. "You'll never be alone again, I promise." And through their bond, she felt the absolute truth of his words. The wedding preparations took 3 months, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. A union between a human and a Kryn princess would have been remarkable enough. But Jack and Lissa's bond had become something of a legend. The couple who completed the ancient trials, the human who could withstand what no one else could, the princess who finally found someone who wouldn't leave. Delegations from hundreds of worlds requested invitations. The ceremony would blend human and Kryn traditions, something that had never been attempted. Ambassador Vorath threw himself into the planning with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone who knew him. His daughter was happy, truly happy, for the first time in her life. Jack stood in his quarters aboard the human vessel Venture, adjusting his dress uniform one more time. Commander Stevens sat nearby, watching with amusement. "Nervous?" Stevens asked. "Terrified," Jack admitted. "There are going to be thousands of people watching. Representatives from the entire Galactic Council. You walked through a psychic storm and completed trials that haven't been done in 200 years. I think you can handle a wedding." Jack laughed, but his hands were still shaking slightly as he fastened the last button. Through his bond with Lissa, he could feel that she was nervous too, getting ready in another part of the station. But underneath the nerves was excitement and joy, so bright it made him smile. "You really love her, don't you?" Stevens said quietly. "Yeah, I really do." Jack looked at his reflection, still slightly amazed that this was his life now. 6 months ago, I was just a lieutenant following orders. Now I'm about to marry an alien princess and become part of a royal family. Life comes at you fast in space. The ceremony was held in the largest hall on the council station. The room had been transformed, decorated with both earth flowers and Kryn-like crystals that floated in geometric patterns overhead. Guests filled hundreds of seats, representing species from across the known galaxy. Jack stood at the front, trying not to look at the massive crowd. Beside him stood the officiant, a neutral council elder who would oversee the ceremony. Human custom required a best man, and Jack had asked Stevens to fill the role. Then the music started, a blend of human orchestral sounds and Kryn harmonic tones that somehow worked together beautifully. The crowd stood and turned toward the entrance. Lissa appeared, and Jack forgot how to breathe. She wore a dress that combined elements of both their cultures. The base was traditional Kryn ceremonial robes that shimmered with embedded crystals, but the style had been adapted with flowing elements inspired by human wedding gowns. Her dark blue hair was arranged in an intricate pattern that must have taken hours. And her eyes, those brilliant purple eyes, were locked on Jack as she walked down the aisle. Through their bond, Jack felt her emotions clearly. The nervousness was still there, but it was overwhelmed by love and certainty. She'd been afraid for so long that this moment would never come, that she'd spend her entire life alone. Now, walking toward him, she knew that fear was finally over. Ambassador Vorath walked beside his daughter, his hand on her arm. When they reached the front, he looked at Jack for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone, he placed Lissa's hand in Jack's and spoke in English. "Take care of her." "Always," Jack promised. The ceremony began with Kryn traditions. The officiant spoke words in the Kryn language, ancient vows that had been used for thousands of years. Lissa responded in kind, her voice steady and clear. Then came the human elements. Jack had insisted on including vows from Earth, words that would be familiar to the relatively small human delegation in the crowd. I, Jack Morris, take you, Lissa, to be my wife. I promise to stand by you in good times and bad, to support you when you need strength, and to share in your joys and sorrows. I promise never to run, never to give up, and never to let you face anything alone. Lissa's eyes were shining with tears. I, Lissa, take you, Jack Morris, to be my husband. I promise to trust you with all that I am, including the parts of myself I've been afraid to show. I promise to be your anchor as you've been mine, and to build a life with you that honors both our worlds. They exchanged rings, another human tradition. Jack slipped a simple silver band onto Lissa's finger. Through their psychic bond, the meaning of the rings resonated deeper than any physical symbol could. A promise of forever. The officiant raised his hands. Under the laws of the Galactic Council and the ancient traditions of the Kryn Empire, I declare this union recognized and binding. You may seal your bond. Jack pulled Lissa close and kissed her. The psychic energy that flowed between them was gentle now, controlled, a warm wave of love and happiness that spread through the hall. Even the guests who weren't psychically sensitive felt it, a general sense of joy that made everyone smile. The crowd erupted in applause, hundreds of different species, all celebrating together. It was a moment of unity that the council hadn't seen in years. But Lord Zenthar wasn't finished yet. At the reception, while guests mingled and enjoyed food from dozens of different worlds, Zenthar approached the main table, where Jack and Lissa sat. He was flanked by two other Kryn nobles, all of them wearing expressions of cold disapproval. Congratulations on your union, Zenthar said, though his tone suggested the opposite. However, there is one final matter that must be addressed. Vorov stood up from his seat nearby. Zenthar, this is neither the time nor the place. On the contrary, this is exactly the time. Zenthar pulled out a datapad. I have researched our laws extensively. There is a clause in the ancient codes that requires the consort of the royal Kryn to demonstrate their ability to protect their partner. A ritual combat, to prove they are worthy. Jack felt Lissa's hand tighten on his through the bond. This was what Zenthar had been planning all along, a final attempt to end their union. I challenge Lieutenant Morris to ritual combat, Zenthar declared loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. If he cannot prove his ability to protect the princess, the marriage can be annulled under traditional law. Vorath looked furious, but Jack stood up before he could speak. I accept the challenge. Jack, no, Lissa whispered. He's a trained Kryn warrior. You can't match his strength. Through their bond, Jack sent her calm and certainty. Trust me, we've got this. The ritual combat took place in a circular arena that was quickly set up in an adjacent hall. Guests crowded around to watch, the celebration temporarily forgotten. Jack removed his uniform jacket and stood in the center of the arena, wearing only his shirt and pants. Zenthar entered from the opposite side, and the size difference was immediately obvious. The Kryn Lord was nearly 8 feet tall, heavily muscled, and had trained in combat for decades. Jack was just under 6 feet, and while fit for military service, he was clearly outmatched physically. The rules are simple, the combat master explained. First to yield or to be rendered unable to continue loses. Lethal force is not permitted. Zenthar smiled coldly. This will be over quickly, human. You should never have accepted. Maybe, Jack said, but I protect what's mine. The combat began, and Zenthar moved with surprising speed for his size. His first strike would have knocked Jack unconscious if it had landed, but Jack wasn't there. He dodged at the last possible moment, guided by something he couldn't quite explain. Through the psychic bond, Lissa was feeding him information. not controlling him, but sharing her awareness. She could sense Zenthar's intentions the split second before he moved, and Jack's brain processed that information instinctively. Zenthar struck again, and again Jack evaded. The Kryn warrior's frustration grew with each miss. The human should have been crushed by now. Jack didn't try to match Zenthar's strength. Instead, he used speed and anticipation, staying just out of reach. And each time Zenthar prepared to strike, he felt a subtle psychic pressure, just enough to throw off his timing. Lissa, supporting Jack in the only way she could, without directly interfering. "You're not fighting alone," Zenthar growled, finally understanding. "The princess is helping you." "That's the point," Jack said, breathing hard from the exertion. "You wanted to know if I could protect her, but protection isn't just about fighting, it's about working together, being stronger as a team than either of us could be alone." Zenthar lunged forward with all his strength, trying to end the fight with pure force. But Jack anticipated it, guided by Lissa's psychic awareness. He sidestepped and used Zenthar's momentum against him, a basic martial arts technique he'd learned in training. The Kryn lord stumbled, off balance. Jack could have pressed the advantage, maybe scored a hit, while Zenthar was vulnerable. But that wasn't the point. He stepped back and waited for Zenthar to recover. "This isn't about me beating you," Jack said. "It's about showing that Lissa and I are a team. Your old ways say a consort must protect their partner alone, through strength. But we're writing new rules. Together, we're stronger than anyone expected." Zenthar straightened, studying Jack with new eyes. Around them, the crowd was murmuring. Some approved, others were skeptical, but all were watching. "You cannot win against me in pure combat," Zenthar said. "Probably not. But I don't need to win. I just need to prove I'll never stop fighting for her." Jack moved back to a defensive stance. "I'll stay in this ring as long as it takes. You can knock me down 100 times, and I'll get up 101. That's what humans do. We don't give up on the people we love." The psychic bond flared brighter, and everyone in the room felt it. Lissa's love for Jack, Jack's unwavering commitment to her, the strength they drew from each other. It was more powerful than any display of physical force could have been. Zenthar stood there for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he lowered his hands and stepped back. "I yield." The crowd erupted in surprised conversation. Jack blinked, confused. "What?" "You've proven your point, Lieutenant Morris." Zenthar's expression was unreadable. "I challenged you to demonstrate your ability to protect the princess. You've shown that your protection comes not from strength alone, but from an unbreakable commitment and a bond that makes both of you stronger." He turned to address the crowd. "The ancient laws were written in a different time. Perhaps it's time we acknowledged that strength comes in many forms." He approached Jack and placed a hand on his shoulder in a traditional Kryn gesture of respect. "Protect her well, human. She deserves it." Then Zenthar left the arena. Some of his supporters followed, but others remained, their opposition weakened by what they'd witnessed. Jack rushed to Lissa, who met him halfway. They embraced, and through their bond, no words were needed. They'd faced every challenge together, and they'd won. The celebration resumed with renewed energy. Guests who had been skeptical were now curious, wanting to speak with the couple who had overcome so much. The human delegation beamed with pride, while the Kryn nobles who had supported Vorath celebrated openly. Late into the night, after most guests had left, Jack and Lissa stood alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Earth was visible in the distance, a small blue marble, somewhere in Kryn space. Lissa's homeworld waited. "Two worlds," Lissa said softly. "We come from two different worlds. We're going to need to split our time. Visit Earth, visit the Kryn territories, Make both places home. Can we really do that? Bridge two cultures so completely different? Jack pulled her closer. We've already done the impossible. We formed a bond that no one thought could exist. We completed trials that hadn't been attempted in centuries. We proved to an entire galaxy that sometimes the best matches are the ones no one expects. Through their bond, Lissa felt his certainty, his love, his absolute commitment to making this work. And she sent back the same. Her emotions no longer a weapon, but a gift she could finally share freely. What do you think will happen now? She asked. Now? Now we go to Earth for our honeymoon. I want to show you Seattle, where I grew up. Then we'll visit your homeworld, and you can teach me more about Kryn history. Jack smiled. After that, we figure out the rest together. We become ambassadors, showing everyone that humans and Kryn can work together. Maybe we help other unlikely couples find their own bonds. Maybe we change the galaxy just a little bit. That sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, but we're good at doing impossible things. Lissa laughed, the sound pure and joyful. Not so long ago, she'd been alone in an isolation chamber, convinced she would spend her entire life separated from everyone else. Now she stood with her husband, bound together by a connection deeper than anything the galaxy had seen before. Jack, she said softly. Yeah? Thank you for stepping forward that day, for being brave enough to try when no one else would. Jack thought back to that moment in the council chamber, raising his hand while everyone else remained silent. At the time, he'd just been responding to someone in need. He'd had no idea it would lead to this, a bond, a marriage, a future full of possibilities. You don't need to thank me, he said. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. They stood together watching the stars, two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. The galaxy was vast and full of species that had been exploring it for thousands of years. But sometimes, the newest species brought the most surprising gifts. Sometimes, all it took was one person willing to step forward and say yes. One person willing to look past the fear and see the person underneath. One person stubborn enough to prove that love could bridge any distance, overcome any obstacle, and create bonds stronger than anyone imagined. And in return, he'd found something he didn't even know he was looking for. A partner, a purpose, and a love that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Behind them, the galaxy spun on, full of new challenges and opportunities. But whatever came next, they would face it together.